At 12:14 a.m. on September 26, 1983, an alarm went off inside a secret Soviet military bunker south of Moscow. The alarm said one word: launch. The computer had just detected 5 American nuclear missiles in the air, inbound, heading toward the Soviet Union. Every protocol in the room said the same thing: report it, pass it up the chain, let the chain do the rest. The officer on duty didn't do that. He picked up the phone and told his superiors it was a false alarm. He was right. He never received another promotion. His name was Stanislav Petrov. He was 44 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet military. His job that night was not to make decisions. His job was to watch the screens and report what they said. The bunker was called Serpukhov 15. It doesn't appear on most public maps, even now. Its purpose was singular: to monitor the planet for incoming nuclear strikes, to give Soviet command the minutes they would need to fire back before impact. Petrov was covering for a colleague, someone who couldn't make it in that night. This is how the most consequential 12 minutes of the Cold War began. But here is the question nobody seems to ask. Petrov knew the protocol. He had been trained on it. He understood exactly what the system expected him to do. He didn't do it. And for almost 15 years, he never told anyone why.
To understand what Petrov was sitting inside of, you have to go back. 25 days before that night, Soviet Air Defense Forces shot down a Korean passenger jet, Flight 007, 269 people on board. None of them survived. The United States called it murder. The Soviet Union called it a defense decision. Ronald Reagan had called the USSR an evil empire 6 months before. He had also announced a missile defense program, a shield that, if it worked, could absorb a Soviet first strike and leave the United States capable of hitting back. The Soviets did not read that as defensive. They read it as preparation for a war they weren't supposed to survive. There was a KGB intelligence operation running at the time. It was called Operation Ryan. It had been active since the early 1980s, launched under Yuri Andropov himself. Its only purpose was to watch for signs that the United States was preparing a nuclear first strike. Every Soviet intelligence station in the world had the same instruction: look for unusual military movement, watch for stockpiling, look for government officials disappearing into bunkers, watch for any indicator that the Americans were about to go. The Soviets were not being paranoid in a vacuum, or rather, they were being paranoid, but they had reasons. The tension that September was unlike anything since Cuba in 1962, and then the alarm went off. Here is the detail that should not make sense. The computer showed 5 missiles. 5. Not a coordinated wave, not hundreds of warheads timed to arrive simultaneously across every Soviet city. 5. Any military strategist will tell you the same thing. If the United States decided to start a nuclear war, they would not launch 5 missiles. A first strike is designed around one principle: overwhelming force before the other side can respond. You do not send 5 missiles to begin a nuclear war. You send everything you have, all at once, so that nothing comes back at you. 5 missiles don't end a war. 5 missiles get intercepted, and the other side has every reason to retaliate. Petrov saw that number, and something in his mind didn't fit. He had minutes, not hours. The clock was already running. Later, in interviews, Petrov described what went through his mind during those minutes. His job was technically simple. The screen says launch, you report launch. You don't analyze, you don't question. You pass the information up and let the chain decide. But 2 things were stopping him. First, 5 missiles. It made no tactical sense. Second, the ground radar. Soviet nuclear protocol required satellite detection to be confirmed by ground radar before an alert became formal. The ground radar was showing nothing, not a single confirmation. Silence. Satellite says launch, ground says nothing. Petrov picked up the phone and said something that wasn't in any training manual. I believe this is a false alarm. And then he sat there, in the bunker, in the middle of the night, waiting, not knowing if the next thing he would experience was silence or fire on the horizon. The satellites had malfunctioned. The Soviet early warning constellation, the system known as Oko, which means eye in Russian, had been caught in an unusual alignment. A specific angle of sunlight reflecting from high-altitude clouds over the American Midwest was producing a signature that looked, to the satellite sensors, exactly like the heat exhaust of a ballistic missile launch. The system had been designed to be maximally sensitive because missing a real launch was not a survivable error, but maximum sensitivity means you can also be triggered by the wrong thing. That night, The wrong thing happened 5 separate times. The satellite kept cycling through the same detection window, and it kept seeing the same reflected light. 5 detections, 5 alarms. The most advanced nuclear early warning system the Soviet Union had ever built had been fooled by sunlight on clouds. Not hacked, not sabotaged, not a drill. Sunlight on clouds. Go back to the 5 missiles. Petrov doubted the alarm partly because 5 was too small a number to make any military sense. That doubt may have saved the world, but that is not why the system triggered 5 times. The satellite hadn't seen 5 missiles. It had seen the same reflected light over and over from the same angle in 5 separate passes. The number 5 had nothing to do with reality. It was a coincidence that happened to point in the right direction. Petrov's instinct was right, but not entirely for the reasons he thought. When the investigation was over and the malfunction was confirmed, Petrov waited for some form of acknowledgement, not a ceremony. This was all classified. Nobody was going to hold a public event, but acknowledgement. And here is what he received: a reprimand. Not for making the wrong call. He had made the right call. He was reprimanded because in the chaos of those 12 minutes, holding a telephone in one hand, marking status updates on his console with the other, he hadn't kept his written log correctly. The paperwork was incomplete. And here is what sits underneath that. A full investigation into what happened that night would have required formally documenting the flaws in the Oko satellite system. Those flaws were real. The system had nearly triggered a nuclear exchange by misreading clouds. Nobody at the top of Soviet military command wanted that in a formal report. Petrov was quietly transferred. He never received the promotion that had been expected. He took early retirement. He moved into a small apartment in a town called Fryazovo outside Moscow. For almost 15 years, he didn't speak about any of it. The world had no idea what it owed him. Then, in 1998, a retired Soviet general named Yuri Votintsev mentioned the incident in his memoirs, and everything changed.
Once the story became public, the world did what it does with stories like this. Petrov received awards, he flew to New York, he was honored at the United Nations, a Danish filmmaker made a documentary, he won the Dresden Peace Prize in 2013, he attended the ceremonies, he shook hands, he accepted the plaques. And in interview after interview, he said something that everyone seemed to hear and then quietly set aside. He said he wasn't sure he deserved any of it. I was just doing my job, he told journalists, and then he would pause. Except I wasn't doing my job. I was not supposed to decide. That was not my job. That line is the entire story. He was not supposed to decide. The system had not been built for one person to decide. It had been built specifically so that no single person could stop the sequence once it began. You detect, you report. The report goes up, the chain responds. At some point, if everything confirms, the response goes out. The human beings inside the chain aren't there to stop the process. They are there to serve it. But a man sat in a chair in a bunker at midnight, looked at a screen that said launch, looked at a number that made no tactical sense, looked at a ground radar showing nothing, and decided the process was wrong. He broke the system on purpose, in real time, without any certainty that he was right. Go back to the beginning. The alarm went off. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work. It detected an anomaly. It raised an alert. It told the officer what it had found. It expected the officer to report. Stanislav Petrov was not a hero who used the system well. He was the flaw the system was never supposed to have. A single human being capable of doubt inside a machine that had been engineered to remove doubt entirely. The system worked perfectly. The flaw was what saved everything.
Petrov died on May 19, 2017. He was 77 years old. He died in his apartment in Fryazovo. It took months for news of his death to reach the outside world. He had been living alone. There was nobody nearby to make the call. In his last interviews, he said something that tends to disappear in the heroic version of his story. He said he was not a hero. He said the engineers who built Oko had made a mistake, and he had simply been there when the mistake happened. He said he never wanted to be responsible for whether the world lived or died. He said that had never been his job. He was right. It was never supposed to be his job. Thousands of people were inside that system on the night of September 26, 1983. Every radar operator, every command center officer, every soldier with a protocol and a chain above them. Only one of them looked at the screen and thought, "This doesn't feel right." The rest followed the process, because that is what the process is for. The alarm still said launch. Somewhere right now, a system is watching the sky, and somewhere in that system, there is a human being.